A millionaire loses control after his mistress fills his head with lies. In a marble mansion, he grabs a wooden stick and beats his pregnant wife while the mistress watches and smiles. He thinks he's untouchable, but what he doesn't know is that her 3 brothers, powerful CEOs from New York, San Francisco, and Seattle, are already coming for him. What follows is a storm of betrayal, power, and revenge that shakes the entire city. You won't believe how it ends until we dive in. Tell us what time you're listening and where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Under the silver glow of the California night, the mansion on the hill stood silent. Rain whispered against its glass walls, dripping down the marble balcony that overlooked the city. Inside, the house looked perfect. Every lamp was dim, every flower placed with precision. Yet, beneath that perfection, something monstrous was about to unfold. Isabella Carter sat on the edge of the grand staircase, her hands resting gently on her growing belly. She was 4 months pregnant. Her white silk nightgown shimmered faintly under the chandelier light. She whispered to the tiny heartbeat inside her, "You're safe, my love. Mommy's here." She had spent the whole afternoon preparing a quiet dinner for her husband, Edward Kane, the millionaire investor whose name graced magazines and business channels. But the man who was once her dream had turned into her nightmare. The clock struck 10. The rain grew heavier. The moment the front door slammed open, Isabella flinched. Edward stumbled in, his black suit soaked, his breath thick with alcohol. His tie hung loose, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "Where were you tonight?" he demanded. His voice echoed through the marble hall. Isabella rose slowly, her hand on the railing for balance. "At home, Edward. I've been waiting for you. Dinner's still warm." He laughed bitterly, throwing his coat across the floor. "Liar. Vanessa told me everything." His words cut like glass. "You think you can make a fool out of me?" Her heart froze. Vanessa Moore, the mistress, the woman who had slithered into their lives months ago, whispering poison into Edward's ear, twisting every truth until love turned into suspicion. Isabella shook her head desperately. "She's lying. Please, Edward. She wants to destroy us." Edward's face twisted. He stepped closer, the scent of whiskey heavy between them. "Don't you dare say her name like that. Edward, you're drunk. Let's talk tomorrow. Please, our baby." But her plea only fed his fury. He reached for the wooden stick he had been using earlier to fix the fence outside. The handle was still wet from the rain. His knuckles tightened around it. "Whose child is it?" he roared. Her eyes widened in horror. "Yours. It's ours." He didn't believe her. The lies Vanessa had told him were too deep, too venomous. He raised the stick high, his muscles trembling with rage. Isabella stepped back, clutching her belly with one hand, her voice shaking. "Edward, please, don't do this. Not in front of our child." The stick came down with brutal force. A sharp crack echoed across the hall as the blow struck her shoulder. Pain burst through her body. She cried out, stumbling onto the cold marble. Her hand reached instinctively to protect her stomach. Tears blurred her vision. "Please, stop. Edward, you're hurting the baby." He didn't hear her. Or maybe he didn't care. The second strike landed against her back. The third caught her arm as she tried to shield herself. Each blow fell heavier, faster, fueled by a blind fury that no reason could calm. "Confess," he shouted. "Say it's not mine." Her voice broke between sobs. "It is yours, Edward. I love you. Please stop." But love meant nothing to the man standing before her now. His veins bulged, his face twisted into something unrecognizable. He lifted the stick again, his shadow stretching long and monstrous across the walls. When the next hit landed, Isabella's scream tore through the mansion. It was raw, primal, the sound of both pain and betrayal. The chandelier above swayed slightly from the echo. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. A neighbor paused, hearing the noise, but the rain drowned it. Isabella's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor, her cheek pressed against the cold marble. Blood smeared beneath her lips. She tried to crawl backward, gasping for breath. "Please, Edward, the baby, please!" Her words reached him, but they didn't pierce through the fog of rage. He stood over her, breathing heavily, the stick trembling in his hand. For a brief second, something human flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. He swung again. The final blow hit her side. she fell still. The house went silent except for the storm outside. The rain against the windows sounded almost like applause, mocking the violence that had just unfolded inside. Edward dropped the stick, panting, staring at the motionless woman at his feet. Her nightgown was torn, stained with red. Her long brown hair spread across the marble like a halo gone dark. "You'll regret lying to me," he muttered, voice shaking. He turned and stumbled toward the liquor cabinet, pouring another drink with trembling hands. Isabella's vision faded in and out. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold. Somewhere deep inside, she whispered to her baby, her words barely audible. "Stay with me. Please, little one. Stay strong." Her eyelids fluttered. The chandelier lights above blurred into halos. She thought she saw movement at the doorway. A shadow. Maybe the neighbor who had come to check. Then everything went black. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights reflected through the rain, splashing across the mansion walls. A neighbor stood outside, phone in hand, trembling as she pointed toward the house. Paramedics rushed in, their shoes slipping on the wet marble as they reached the woman lying motionless on the floor. "She's pregnant," one shouted. "We need to move now." They lifted Isabella carefully onto the stretcher. Her pulse was weak. Blood streaked her neck, her arms, her gown. One paramedic placed an oxygen mask over her face. "Stay with us, ma'am. Stay with us." Yan. Outside, the ambulance doors slammed shut. The sirens screamed as the vehicle tore down the flooded streets toward Los Angeles Memorial Hospital. Inside, Isabella's hand twitched faintly. Her fingers still curved protectively over her belly. The paramedic glanced at the monitor. The baby's heartbeat flickered weakly but steady. Back at the mansion, Edward stood alone in the living room, surrounded by shattered glass and the faint scent of blood and rain. His reflection stared back at him from the window, hollow-eyed and shaking. He didn't follow the ambulance. He didn't call anyone. He just poured another drink and whispered to the storm, "She deserved it." Outside, thunder rolled. But what Edward Kane didn't know was that the call made by one terrified neighbor had already set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything he had built. 3 men, thousands of miles away, would soon learn what he had done, and when they arrived, their vengeance would shake the world. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time the ambulance reached Los Angeles Memorial Hospital. Its sirens pierced the quiet night, echoing against the white concrete walls of the emergency wing. Inside, under the harsh fluorescent light, Isabella Carter drifted in and out of consciousness. Every bump of the road sent waves of pain through her body. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold and slick with sweat. The oxygen mask fogged with every desperate inhale. A paramedic leaned over her, checking her pulse, his voice urgent. "Her pressure's dropping. We need a trauma room right now." The double doors burst open as they wheeled her inside. Nurses hurried alongside, shouting codes and instructions. "She's pregnant. 4 months. Domestic assault," one called out. The words felt distant to Isabella, as if someone else's story was being told. She tried to speak, but her throat burned. The only sound that escaped her lips was a whisper, "My baby. Please save my baby." They transferred her to a clean white bed surrounded by machines. The steady beeping of a heart monitor filled the room, mixing with the muffled storm outside. A doctor entered, his gray-streaked hair damp from the rain, his face calm but focused. His name tag read Dr. Ethan Brooks. He glanced at the monitors and then at Isabella's bruised body. "Get me a fetal Doppler," he ordered quickly, "and prepare for an ultrasound. We need to check the heartbeat." "You." As the nurse spread gel across Isabella's abdomen, the room fell silent. The screen flickered with static, then showed the faint rhythm of life. A tiny pulse fluttered. "We have a heartbeat," the nurse said, her voice soft with relief. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Good. Let's keep it that way." Isabella's eyes opened for a brief second. She saw the doctor's face, calm and kind. His voice reached her like an anchor in the storm. "You're safe now. Rest. We're taking care of you." She wanted to thank him, but the darkness pulled her under again. Outside the emergency room, the rain-soaked street reflected the flashing red lights. Police officers gathered near the ambulance, taking statements from the neighbor who had called 911. Her hands shook as she spoke. I heard screams, a man yelling, then silence. She didn't answer when I knocked. The officer nodded grimly. You did the right thing. We'll need a statement later. 1. Inside the hospital, whispers spread among the night staff. That's Isabella Carter, one nurse murmured to another. The wife of Edward Kane, the other gasped. You mean that Edward Kane? The real estate tycoon? The nurse nodded. They said he attacked her. She almost lost the baby. Their words carried a mixture of shock and pity. In the ICU, Isabella's body trembled under the thin blanket. Every breath hurt. Every muscle ached. The bruises along her arms were deep, purple and red against her pale skin. Her lips were cracked, her face swollen. Yet even in that broken state, one hand stayed pressed over her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the world that had turned cruel. Hours passed. Machines beeped rhythmically, marking the fragile line between life and loss. Doctor. Brooks checked her vitals again and whispered to a nurse, She's stable for now, but we'll need to monitor for internal bleeding. The nurse nodded. Should we notify family? He paused, flipping through her chart. No emergency contacts listed, only her husband. His eyes darkened for a moment. We'll hold off on that. Down the hall, a woman in scrubs stood silently by a vending machine, watching the bustle of the ER. Her name was Linda Parker, a nurse who had worked at the hospital for 12 years. She had seen hundreds of tragedies, but something about this one hit differently. Maybe it was the way the young woman clutched her stomach even in unconsciousness. Maybe it was the bruises that told a story no one should ever have to live. Linda hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. She reached for her phone and discreetly pressed record through the small window of the trauma room. The image captured the IV lines, the bruises, the faint beeping monitor, and the doctor whispering, "Stay with us, Isabella." Linda didn't know it yet, but that recording would later become the piece of truth that changed everything. By dawn, the storm had passed. The hospital corridors were washed in pale light. The city outside began to stir, unaware of the quiet war that had just begun inside those walls. Isabella woke briefly, her eyelids fluttering open. The first thing she saw was the white ceiling. The second was the soft reflection of herself in the glass panel beside the bed. Her lips quivered as the memories returned. The stick, the blows, the sound of Edward's voice shouting her name like a curse. Her pulse spiked. "No," she whispered. "Please, no more." A nurse rushed to her side. "You're safe, Mrs. Carter. You're in the hospital. Try not to move." Isabella turned her head weakly. "The baby?" The nurse smiled gently. "Your baby's heartbeat is strong." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. She tried to speak but only managed a hoarse "thank you." Relief mixed with exhaustion. Her body trembled, but inside her, a tiny flicker of strength began to stir. At that same moment, miles away, Edward Kane sat in his penthouse with Vanessa Moore. The morning sun spilled through the glass windows, reflecting off the golden liquor in his glass. Vanessa curled beside him, her red lips twisted in amusement. "So, did she finally learn her place?" she asked, her tone cold. Edward didn't answer right away. He stared out at the city skyline, his reflection a hollow shell of triumph and guilt. "She'll never leave me," he muttered. "She's too weak." Vanessa laughed softly. "Weak women don't survive beatings like that, Edward. You might be surprised." She stood, wrapping a silk robe around her, and kissed him on the cheek. "But don't worry. If she ever talks, I'll make sure no one believes her." Back at the hospital, Dr. Brooks entered Isabella's room again. He checked her reviewed her chart, then looked at her gently. "You're lucky to be alive," he said quietly. "If the neighbor hadn't called, you and the baby might not have made it." Her voice trembled. "He tried to kill me." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I know, and I'm going to document everything. You'll need protection." As he left the room, Linda Parker appeared beside him. "Doctor," she whispered, holding up her phone. "I recorded part of the treatment. It shows her condition when she arrived. It could be important evidence if this goes to court." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Keep it safe. We'll need the truth when the time comes." The camera of her phone caught one last image as Linda tucked it away. Isabella's pale hand resting over her stomach, the faint monitor beeping beside her. Life was still there, fragile but unbroken. Outside, the first light of morning broke through the clouds, casting a soft glow across the hospital windows. Inside, Isabella closed her eyes again, whispering to the child inside her, "You and me, my love. We'll survive this." And though she didn't yet know it, far across the country, 3 powerful men were waking to the sound of their phones ringing. Within hours, the storm that Edward Kane had unleashed would no longer belong to him. It would belong to the Carter brothers. The morning sun had barely risen over the East Coast when the first phone began to ring. Inside a corner office overlooking Manhattan, Robert Carter was reviewing real estate contracts when his assistant burst in, her face pale. "Sir, it's urgent. The hospital in Los Angeles is calling." Robert's brow furrowed. Few things rattled him. As CEO of one of the nation's largest real estate empires, he was used to late-night emergencies, but something in her voice made his pulse quicken. He grabbed the phone. "This is Robert Carter." A nurse's voice came through, soft but trembling. "Mr. Carter, your sister Isabella has been admitted to Los Angeles Memorial Hospital. She's in critical condition. She was the victim of an assault." The world seemed to stop. Papers slipped from his hands. "An assault?" he repeated slowly. "Yes, sir. She's stable now, but she suffered significant injuries. We're monitoring both her and the baby." For a moment, Robert couldn't speak. He pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to process what he had just heard. Then his voice hardened. "Who did this to her?" There was silence on the line, then a quiet answer. "Her husband, Mr. Edward Kane." The name hit him like a blow. His fingers curled around the phone. The image of Isabella smiling at her wedding flashed through his mind. Her white dress flowing in the garden light, Edward's hand around hers. That image shattered in an instant. "Tell the doctor to keep her safe," Robert said, his voice now a command. "We'll be there within hours." He ended the call and stood frozen for a brief second, his reflection staring back from the window, calm, sharp, dangerous. Then he turned to his assistant. "Cancel every meeting. Get my jet ready. I'm leaving for Los Angeles in 30 minutes. Across the country in San Francisco, another phone rang. David Carter, the middle brother, sat in a boardroom surrounded by his team of executives. Charts and figures lit up the projector screen. His assistant leaned in, whispering, "It's the hospital, sir. About your sister." He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "This is David Carter." The same nurse's voice spoke carefully, almost afraid of his reaction. "Mr. Carter, Isabella has been hospitalized. She's stable, but she was attacked by her husband." David's jaw tightened. "Attacked?" "She suffered multiple contusions and nearly lost her child. The doctors saved both of them. She's asking for no one right now, but the staff thought you should know." David closed his eyes briefly, gripping the phone until his knuckles turned white. He had always been the logical one, the strategist who believed every problem could be solved with calm planning. But at that moment, calm felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. "Book me a flight to Los Angeles," he told his assistant as soon as he re-entered the room. "Sir, the quarterly review." "Cancel it," he interrupted sharply. "Family first." Meanwhile, in Seattle, the youngest brother, Daniel Carter, was in the middle of a meeting with his tech developers. He laughed at a joke someone made, but the moment his phone vibrated and he saw the caller ID, the smile vanished. He answered quickly. "Hello? Mr. Carter," said the nurse. "I'm calling from Los Angeles Memorial. Your sister Isabella." He didn't let her finish. "What happened?" "She's in critical condition, but stable. There was an assault. We believe her husband is responsible." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. The silence stretched so long that the nurse asked softly, "Sir, are you still there?" He exhaled sharply. "I'm here. Thank you for calling. She's not alone anymore." He hung up, stood, and looked around the room. "Meeting's over," he said quietly. His assistant frowned. "Is everything all right, sir?" "No, not even close." Within an hour, 3 jets lifted from 3 different airports, cutting through the skies toward the same destination. The brothers didn't speak to each other at first. They didn't need to. The bond that had once been shaped by childhood laughter and family dinners now pulsed with anger and grief. Robert's jet soared above the clouds, but his mind was far below, trapped in the image of his little sister as a girl, the one who used to follow him around with her stuffed bear, asking him to build castles out of couch cushions. He clenched his fists, remembering the last time they spoke. She had sounded tired but cheerful. She never said a word about being in danger. He had missed it. He had missed all the signs. In San Francisco, David sat by the window of his jet, staring at the ocean below. His laptop lay open, filled with spreadsheets and reports, but his eyes saw none of it. He was calculating something else now, not profits or losses, but justice. Every number that flashed through his mind became a plan, a timeline, a strategy for destruction. In Seattle, Daniel couldn't sit still. He paced the aisle of his plane, his hands trembling with rage. He hit her, he muttered to himself. He hit her while she was pregnant. The thought made his vision blur. His crew watched silently, knowing better than to speak. By late afternoon, all three planes landed within minutes of each other at Los Angeles International Airport. The tarmac shimmered under the sunlight, and as the jets came to a stop, three men stepped out, tall, suited, and expressionless. The world knew them as titans of industry, but today they looked like soldiers preparing for war. Robert was the first to speak as they gathered beside the waiting cars. "No press, no delays. We go straight to the hospital." David nodded, his voice low. "Have security on standby. If he shows up there, I want him removed immediately." Daniel's jaw clenched. "No, if he shows up, he won't be walking out." The brothers exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that spoke louder than words. The air between them was thick with fury and grief. Their convoy sped through the streets of Los Angeles, sirens wailing in the distance, sunlight flickering off the windows. Inside the car, Robert's phone buzzed with updates. "She's awake," the nurse said. "She's asking what happened to the baby." He exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "Tell her the baby's safe," he said softly. "Tell her her brothers are coming." When they reached the hospital, cameras flashed from the distance. Reporters already lingered, chasing whispers of the assault involving a millionaire and his wife. The brothers ignored them. They pushed through the front doors, their shoes echoing on the polished floors. Nurses looked up as the three powerful men entered, their presence commanding, their expressions carved in stone. "Isabella Carter," Robert said firmly at the reception desk. "Which room?" The nurse hesitated, startled by his tone. "Room 304. But visiting hours—" "We're not visitors," David interrupted. "We're family." The elevator ride was silent. The soft hum of the machine was the only sound. When the doors opened, the scent of antiseptic filled the air. At the end of the hallway, through a narrow glass window, they saw her. Isabella lay pale and fragile against the white sheets, IV lines running down her arm, her belly faintly rising with each breath. For the first time in years, the three brothers stood together, shoulder to shoulder, not as CEOs, but as men bound by blood and purpose. Robert's voice broke the silence. "He did this to her." David's eyes narrowed. "Then he'll pay for it." Daniel looked at his sister, his fists trembling. "No court, no money, no power will protect him. I'll make sure of that." The hallway lights flickered as the brothers walked toward the room, their steps heavy and determined. The storm that had started in one house was now spreading across the country, carried by three men who would stop at nothing to bring justice to their sister. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the heart monitor. Morning light filtered through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the walls and the edge of the bed where Isabella Carter lay. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, and her brown hair spread like silk against the pillow. She stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. The faint sound of footsteps approached from the hallway, heavy and sure, echoing through the silence. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the ceiling. The second was the faint reflection of herself in the glass cabinet beside the bed. Her heart ached as memories rushed back. The blows, the shouting, the stick in Edward's hands, the pain that shot through her belly, the sound of her own scream. Her chest tightened. She turned her head weakly toward the window, as if the world outside could offer a reason to keep breathing. Her hand moved to her stomach, trembling but protective. "You're still here," she whispered. "Please be here." A gentle knock broke the stillness. The door opened slowly, and three tall figures stepped into the room. For a moment, Isabella thought she was dreaming, then her eyes widened in disbelief. "Robert," she breathed. Her oldest brother crossed the room in 3 long strides. His normally composed face was tight with emotion. He reached her bedside, his voice low but trembling. "I'm here, Bella." David followed, his gray eyes steady but glassy with grief. "We came as soon as we heard," he said quietly. Behind them, Daniel stood frozen in the doorway. His fists were clenched, his jaw trembling, as if the sight before him were too much to bear. Then he moved closer, dropping to his knees beside the bed. He took her bruised hand in both of his. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Isabella's lips parted, but no sound came out. Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the words were too heavy. Finally, she whispered the name that burned her throat. "Edward." Daniel's knuckles went white. "I'll kill him." Robert's voice cut sharply through the air. "You won't." "Not yet." He turned toward the window, his reflection rigid against the sunlight. "We do this the right way. We do it smart." David placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "He's right. We'll handle him, but we need to make sure she and the baby are safe first." Isabella looked between her brothers, her vision blurring with tears. "You shouldn't have come," she said weakly. "You're all so busy." Robert turned back to her, his eyes fierce. "Don't you ever say that again. You are our sister. There is nothing more important than you." Her lips trembled. "He said no one would believe me, that I was nothing without him." "Yuko." David leaned closer, his tone calm but full of conviction. "He was wrong. You have us now. And we believe you." The words broke her. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She tried to hide her face, but Daniel reached out gently, lifting her chin. "Don't cry, Bella. He doesn't get to break you anymore." The nurse quietly entered to check the monitors. She paused for a moment, watching the emotional reunion, and then smiled softly before leaving. When the door closed again, silence filled the room, heavy but no longer lonely. Robert moved to the side of the bed, his sharp gaze taking in every bruise, every cut. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. Isabella swallowed. "The doctor said the baby's heart is strong." Relief washed over all three men at once. David closed his eyes briefly, murmuring a prayer of gratitude. Daniel exhaled, his shoulders slumping slightly, but Robert's face hardened again almost instantly. "Good. Then our fight starts now." Isabella frowned weakly. "Fight?" He met her gaze. "You think we'll let this man walk free after what he did to you? After what he almost did to your child? No, Bella. We will make him answer for every bruise on your skin." Her breath hitched. She wanted to tell them to stop, to let it go, but deep down she knew they were right. Edward Kane wasn't going to stop until he destroyed her completely. She needed her brothers more than she had ever admitted. David pulled a chair close and sat beside her, opening his tablet. "I've already started looking into his companies. He's been moving money into offshore accounts. There are irregularities that could tie him to fraud." Robert nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll hit him where it hurts most, his reputation and his money." Daniel looked up, his voice shaking with fury. "And when the time comes, I'll hit him myself." Isabella reached out, touching his arm gently. "Please, no violence." "I can't lose you too." Daniel softened. "You won't lose me. I just want him to feel an ounce of the pain he gave you." For a while, they sat in silence. The sound of the heart monitor was steady, almost like a quiet drumbeat of hope. Isabella closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. Robert watched her breathing slow, his mind racing. "She's terrified," David said softly. "We have to move fast before he tries anything else." Robert's voice was low but steady. "He already lost control once. That means he'll do it again. We'll make sure she's guarded. Private security, 24 hours. Daniel nodded. "And if he comes here, I'll handle him personally." The oldest brother turned toward him, his tone sharp. "You'll do nothing without my command." Daniel glared, but didn't argue. Beneath their anger lay a shared wound, a collective ache that words couldn't heal. When Isabella stirred again, she looked stronger. "Are you really staying?" she asked softly. Robert leaned in. "We're not leaving until this is over." Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "You always said I was the family's heart. I guess now it's broken." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then we'll fix it together." David stood, gathering his things. "I'll meet with the doctor. We need copies of every medical record and photograph. We'll need proof when this goes to court." Robert nodded, his voice calm but deadly serious. "And I'll call our lawyers. By tonight, Edward Kane won't know what's coming." Daniel remained by her side. "Sleep, Bella. You're safe now." As her eyes closed, a single tear slid down her cheek. For the first time since that terrible night, she believed him. The fear still lingered, but beneath it, something stronger had begun to take root, the belief that justice was coming. Outside the window, the city buzzed with life, unaware that inside one quiet hospital room, 3 powerful men had made a silent vow. The vow was simple: protect her, expose him, end this. And as the brothers stood together in the fading light of afternoon, the unspoken fire in their eyes promised that this story was far from over. The hospital lobby was unusually crowded that afternoon. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, but the air felt heavy, tense, as if the building itself knew what was coming. Upstairs, in room 304, Isabella Carter sat upright in her bed. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clearer than they had been in days. Beside her, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor reminded her that life, fragile but stubborn, still pulsed inside her and within her unborn child. Her brothers were nearby. Robert stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the city below. David sat at the small table with his laptop open, speaking quietly with their legal team. Daniel leaned against the wall, restless, his fists tightening and loosening as if holding back a storm. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and flowers. Then the nurse appeared at the door, her expression uneasy. "Mr. Carter," she said hesitantly, looking at Robert. "There are 2 visitors here to see Mrs. Carter." Robert's eyes narrowed. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "Her husband and another woman. He insists on seeing her." The air froze. Daniel straightened immediately, his jaw locking. "He's here?" David rose from his chair, closing the laptop with deliberate calm. "We told security to keep him out." "I tried to stop him," the nurse said nervously, "but he's already in the hallway." Before Robert could respond, the door burst open. Edward Kane stepped in, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor. His expression was smug, confident, as if nothing had happened. His arm was casually draped around Vanessa Moore, who wore a tight red dress and a cruel smile. The room fell silent except for the soft beep of the monitor. Isabella froze. Her heart lurched painfully. She clutched the blanket tighter around her as fear crawled through her body. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Edward smirked. "To finish what you started." Daniel moved forward instantly, his voice sharp and furious. "One more step toward her and I'll put you through that wall." Robert raised a hand, stopping him, though his own expression was ice cold. "You're not welcome here, Kane. Leave before I have you escorted out." Edward ignored him, his gaze fixed on Isabella. "You look better than I expected. Shame the Pity Act didn't keep you down longer." He tossed a folded set of papers onto the bed. "You're going to sign these. It's the least you can do after embarrassing me." Isabella stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," Edward said flatly. "You'll get nothing. Not the house, not the accounts, not even the car. And I'll be filing for full custody of the baby." The words cut through her like glass. She shook her head slowly, disbelief and terror mixing in her voice. "You can't take my child from me." Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume sickly sweet, her tone mocking. "Oh, he can. The courts love fathers with money and power. You'll be lucky if you get visitation." That was enough to break Daniel's restraint. He lunged forward, fury in every step, but David caught him by the arm, pulling him back. "Not here," David hissed. "He wants you to lose control." Edward chuckled, watching the exchange. "What's the matter? The mighty Carters can't handle a few papers?" Robert finally turned from the window. His calm voice carried the weight of command. "You've made a mistake, Edward. You came here thinking you still have power. You don't. You're standing in a hospital you nearly turned into a morgue." Edward's smirk faded for a brief moment, replaced by a flash of guilt that he quickly buried. "She's exaggerating. She's always been dramatic." "Dramatic?" Robert repeated quietly. He stepped closer, his voice deepening with every word. "You beat a pregnant woman with a stick. You left her bleeding on the floor. If not for the neighbor who called 911, you'd be facing a murder charge right now. And you have the audacity to walk into this hospital and call her dramatic?" Edward's mouth tightened, but Vanessa broke the tension with a sharp laugh. "Oh, please. She probably tripped or threw herself around to get attention. You people act like she's some saint." "No." Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to look away. "I didn't throw myself anywhere," she said softly. "You told him lies about me. You destroyed everything. Vanessa tilted her head mockingly. You destroyed it yourself, sweetheart. Maybe if you had been more exciting, he wouldn't have needed me. Daniel couldn't hold back anymore. He stepped forward and slammed his fist against the wall beside the door, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. Get out before I forget who I am. Edward flinched but tried to keep his composure. You think you can intimidate me? I'll ruin all of you. Every company, every deal your family touches, I'll make sure it burns. Robert stood his ground, his voice calm but deadly. You already burned everything that mattered. Now it's our turn. David picked up the papers from the bed and flipped through them. These signatures are a joke. You think she'll sign this after what you did? He tore the top sheet in half, then tossed the rest back at Edward's chest. You'll regret ever walking into this building. Edward's face darkened. You're making a mistake. No, Robert replied coldly. You did. The moment you raised that stick, you signed your own destruction. Vanessa's laughter faltered as she glanced at the brothers surrounding Isabella. Their calm felt dangerous, calculated. She tugged at Edward's sleeve. Let's go, she whispered. They're not worth it. Edward hesitated, glaring at Isabella one last time. This isn't over. Robert stepped forward, his tone final. You're right, it's not. But next time, it won't be us visiting the hospital. It'll be you sitting in a courtroom with your empire collapsing around you. Edward's jaw tightened. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, Vanessa following close behind, her heels clicking against the tile. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence filled the room again. The tension hung thick until Daniel finally exhaled, shaking his head. I swear, if he ever touches her again, Robert interrupted quietly. He won't. From now on, we protect her with everything we have. Isabella's shoulders trembled. He's never going to stop, she whispered. He'll try something else. David walked over to her bedside, his expression steady. Then we'll be ready. You're not alone anymore. Robert nodded. This was his first move. Now it's our turn. The brothers stood side by side, their silhouettes framed by the fading light through the blind. In the corner, the monitor continued its steady rhythm, a quiet reminder that despite everything, Isabella and her child were still fighting. Outside the hospital window, the city glowed in the dusk. But inside that room, the quiet promise of revenge burned brighter than any light in Los Angeles. The following afternoon carried an uneasy calm. The storm had passed, but tension lingered in every shadow of Los Angeles Memorial Hospital. Inside room 304, the air felt heavy, like a secret waiting to be revealed. Isabella Carter sat upright in her bed, her eyes fixed on the vase of lilies that had arrived that morning. Their white petals looked too pure for the room that had witnessed so much fear. A small card rested beside them. It said only one word, forgive. Her heart tightened. She didn't need to wonder who had sent them. She already knew, Edward. The nurse entered quietly to check her for. Beautiful flowers, she said with a polite smile. Isabella nodded weakly but didn't answer. Her mind was spinning. Since the confrontation the day before, her brothers had kept a tight watch on her, making sure Edward and Vanessa stayed away. Yet somehow, he had found a way to reach her again. Outside the room, Robert was speaking with a security guard. No one comes in without clearance. Not even family, he instructed. David was pacing the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. He was calling the lawyers, gathering every document, every report. Daniel leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his expression carved from fury. When Robert returned, Isabella tried to sound calm. He sent the flowers. Robert glanced at the vase, then at her pale face. Did anyone deliver them in person? She shook her head. They just appeared this morning. The nurse said a courier dropped them off. Daniel moved to the bedside and picked up the card. His jaw clenched as he read the single word. Forgive, he repeated bitterly. Forgive? After what he did? He threw the card into the trash. He's playing with you. David entered then, closing his phone. He's trying to manipulate her. This is what abusers do. They switch from rage to regret, to pull control back. Isabella stared at the flowers, her voice trembling. Maybe he's sorry. Maybe he finally realized what he's done. Robert's tone was gentle but firm. Don't fall for it, Bella. Guilt doesn't change a monster. It only makes him smarter. Before she could reply, there was a knock at the door. The nurse stepped inside again, nervous this time. Mrs. Carter, there's someone asking to see you. He says he just wants 5 minutes. Robert's shoulders tensed. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "Your husband." The air snapped like a wire pulled too tight. "No," Daniel said instantly. "He's not coming near her." But Isabella's voice, small and trembling, interrupted. "Wait. Let him in." All three brothers turned toward her, disbelief flashing in their eyes. Robert spoke first. "You can't be serious. I just want to hear what he has to say," she whispered. "If he's truly sorry, maybe this can end peacefully." Robert's eyes darkened, but after a long silence, he nodded toward the door. 5 minutes. If he tries anything, he's gone. Ender. The nurse nodded and opened the door. Edward Kane stepped inside, wearing a clean white shirt, his hair neatly combed. He looked almost like the man Isabella had once loved. He held no arrogance this time. Instead, he carried another bouquet, roses this time, and a manila envelope under his arm. "Bella," he said softly, "you look better." She stared at him, unsure whether to cry or scream. "Why are you here?" "I came to apologize," he said, setting the flowers on the bedside table. "I've been thinking about what happened. I lost control. Vanessa fed me lies, and I believed them. I was wrong." His voice cracked slightly. "Please, forgive me. I just want my family back." Daniel let out a low growl from across the room, but Robert raised a hand to silence him. "Say what you came to say, Kane, and then leave." Edward nodded, then turned back to Isabella. "I spoke to a lawyer this morning. He said we could file a mutual agreement, a reconciliation document. Nothing binding, just a sign of good faith. I brought it here so you could read it." He held out the envelope. David stepped forward instantly. "Let me see that first." Edward smiled faintly. "It's just paperwork, no tricks, I swear." Robert took the envelope from him, eyes sharp. He pulled out the papers, flipping through them quickly. The text was dense, pages filled with legal language. For a moment, nothing stood out. Then one sentence caught his eye. His expression changed. David noticed it too. "What is it?" Robert pointed to a section near the bottom. "Custody agreement in the event of reconciliation failure." His voice hardened. "It states that if the marriage ends again, Isabella relinquishes all parental rights to the child." Isabella's stomach turned cold. "What?" Edward's smile faltered. "That's just a standard clause. Nothing serious. I told the lawyer." "You told the lawyer to bury it," Robert cut in sharply. "This isn't reconciliation. This is entrapment." Daniel stepped forward, fury blazing. "You came here pretending to apologize while trying to steal her baby again." Edward raised his hands defensively. "No, I wasn't." Robert's voice thundered. "Get out." Edward hesitated, glancing between them. "Bella, please, you have to believe me. I didn't mean—" Isabella's tears spilled freely. "You almost killed me, Edward. You nearly killed our child, and now you stand here lying again." Her voice cracked but grew stronger with every word. "I loved you once, but that person doesn't exist anymore. Leave before I forget that I still pity you." For a second, Edward's face twisted with something dark, anger, shame, or both. But seeing the three men closing in around her, he turned and walked out without another word. The door shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert dropped the papers onto the table, his voice low and cold. "That's it. We're done waiting." He just made his last move. David picked up the pages carefully. "This is fraud, clear and deliberate. We'll use this against him." Daniel still stood near the door, his chest heaving. "I want to break him myself." Robert met his eyes. "You'll get your chance. But we'll do it the smart way. We'll destroy him in front of everyone he ever tried to impress." Isabella sank back against her pillow, exhausted but relieved. "He'll never stop, will he?" Robert's gaze softened. "No, but neither will we." David folded the papers neatly into his briefcase. "We'll make sure every lawyer, every judge, and every investor in this city sees who Edward Kane really is." Outside, the afternoon light faded into gold. The shadows stretched across the hospital floor as if foreshadowing the storm that was about to break. For Isabella, that moment was the first time in months she felt something close to safety. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it was no longer hers alone. It now belonged to her brothers too, and together they would make Edward Kane regret the day he ever raised a hand against her. Night fell over Los Angeles like a warning. The hospital lights glowed softly against the skyline, casting long reflections on the wet pavement below. Inside, In the quiet of room 304, Isabella Carter watched the city flicker beyond the glass window. Her body still ached, but something had changed. The fear that once gripped her had begun to turn into resolve. She had spent too long feeling powerless. Now, with her brothers beside her, she felt something stronger than pain. She felt purpose. Robert entered the room first, his expression calm but unreadable. He placed a folder on the table beside her bed. "Everything's in motion," he said. "Lawyers, investigators, media contacts. We start tomorrow." David followed, scrolling through his tablet. "We already found discrepancies in Edward's company ledgers, offshore accounts, falsified transfers, and payments to Vanessa's bar that make no sense." Daniel closed the door behind them. His hands were still bruised from punching a wall the night before. "So he's not just a monster, he's a criminal too," Robert nodded. "Exactly. And we're going to make sure the world knows it." Isabella turned toward them, her voice low but steady. "How?" Robert sat beside her, his eyes softening for a moment. "By being smarter than him. He plays with lies, but we play with truth. That's the difference." David placed his tablet on the table and began explaining the plan. "Step 1. We collect evidence. Every bruise, every record, every message. The hospital staff has already confirmed your injuries match blunt force trauma. That alone will destroy his claim that you fell." Isabella looked down at her bandaged arm. "He said I threw myself down. He said I was trying to get sympathy." Daniel's voice burned with anger. "He's going to choke on those lies when we're done." Robert shot him a warning glance. "Control it. We need patience, not fire." David continued. "Step 2. Expose his finances. Vanessa's name appears in too many transactions. If we can prove they've been laundering money together, both of them go down." Robert nodded. "And step 3. Public exposure. When the world sees who he really is, he won't just lose you, he'll lose everything." For a moment, silence filled the room. The sound of the heart monitor echoed faintly, a steady rhythm marking time. Isabella took a deep breath. "What if he retaliates?" Robert leaned forward, his voice calm but fierce. "Then he'll learn what happens when he underestimates the Carters." She wanted to believe him, yet a small tremor of fear lingered. "He's dangerous, Robert. You don't know what he's capable of." Daniel smiled grimly. "Neither does he. Not yet." The following morning began with quiet chaos. Robert met with a team of private investigators in a nearby cafe, handing them photographs, phone numbers, and financial leads. "Follow the money," he instructed. "Every cent that leaves his company, I want to know where it lands." Meanwhile, David contacted the family's law firm, sending scanned documents from Edward's fake reconciliation agreement. The senior attorney, Sarah Chen, called back within minutes. "These signatures are fabricated. This isn't reconciliation paperwork, it's fraud and coercion. We can build a strong case." Not. By noon, Daniel had spoken to 2 of Isabella's co-workers who had witnessed her arrival at the hospital. They were shaken by what they saw but eager to help. "She was barely conscious," one nurse said. "We heard him shouting outside the ambulance. He didn't even look worried." Daniel recorded their statements carefully, thanking them before leaving the hospital. When he returned to Isabella's room, she was sitting up, brushing her hair for the first time since the assault. Her hands trembled, but her face looked more alive than it had in days. "I need to do something," she said as soon as he entered. "I can't just sit here and watch." Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You already are doing something. You survived. Now let us fight for you." She shook her head. "No, I want to speak. I want people to hear what really happened." Robert, who had just stepped in, paused at the doorway. "Are you sure? Once your story is public, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "If I stay silent, he wins." David joined them, a faint smile touching his lips. "Then we'll make sure your voice is heard clearly." That evening, they met with a trusted journalist at a small studio downtown. Isabella sat in front of the camera, her hands folded in her lap. Her brothers stood behind the glass window in the control room, watching. The lights were bright, almost blinding, but her voice was calm. "I loved my husband," she began quietly. "I believed in him. I believed in us. But love doesn't mean silence. Love doesn't mean bruises. The night he hit me, I begged him to stop because I was carrying his child. He didn't care. He called me a liar. He called our baby a mistake." Her voice broke slightly, but she continued, stronger. For weeks, I thought it was my fault. I thought if I just stayed quiet, everything would be fine. But it's not fine. It never will be until people like him are held accountable. No woman should have to bleed in her own home to prove her worth. The journalist sat quietly, letting her speak. Tears glistened in Isabella's eyes, but her words carried steady power. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice. For every woman who's been told to hide her pain. For every child who deserves to grow up in a world where kindness is strength. When the recording ended, silence filled the studio. Even the cameraman looked moved. Robert entered the room and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said softly. Now the world will know. The interview aired the next morning. Within hours, it went viral. News outlets replayed clips of Isabella's trembling but determined voice. Social media exploded with messages of support. Number Justice for Isabella began trending across the country. In his penthouse, Edward Kane watched the broadcast with fury. Vanessa paced behind him, her expression tight. We need to hit back, she snapped. If the public turns against us, everything's gone. Edward's jaw clenched. Then we fight dirty. Vanessa smirked. That's the only way we know how. Back at the hospital, Isabella scrolled through hundreds of messages on her phone. Strangers offering love, survivors sharing their own stories. She felt tears gather in her eyes. People believe me, she whispered. David nodded. They should. You spoke the truth. Robert checked his phone and looked up. The exposure's working. Sponsors are pulling out of Edward's companies. His stocks dropped 12% in 3 hours. Daniel grinned. Good. Let him taste the beginning of what's coming. For the first time, Isabella smiled. It wasn't the fragile, trembling smile of fear, but the quiet, steady one of a woman reclaiming her life. The city outside glowed under the soft dusk, the same city where her suffering had begun. But now, the storm had shifted. It was no longer hers to carry. It belonged to the man who had tried to break her, and the 3 brothers who were about to bring him to his knees. The next morning, Los Angeles woke to a storm of headlines. News outlets replayed Isabella Carter's interview on every major channel. Her voice, calm but unflinching, echoed across television screens, podcasts, and social media clips. Love doesn't mean silence. Love doesn't mean bruises. Those words became a rallying cry. By noon, the hashtag number Justice for Isabella had crossed millions of views. At Los Angeles Memorial Hospital, Isabella sat by the window, the soft sunlight touching her face. The bruises along her arms were fading, but the fire in her eyes burned brighter than ever. Her brothers entered the room one by one, each carrying updates. Robert was first, his phone in hand. It's everywhere, he said quietly. Every network, every talk show. People are finally seeing him for what he is. David followed, his expression focused but grim. Edward's companies are collapsing. His investors are backing out. His publicist just quit. His lawyer is refusing to represent him. Non? Daniel closed the door behind him, grinning for the first time in days. Vanessa's bar is empty. Reporters are camping outside her apartment. She's losing everything too. Isabella listened silently, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass of water. So the world believes me now, she said softly. But belief doesn't erase what he did. Robert nodded. No, but it gives us power, and we'll use that power to make sure he never hurts anyone again. David sat at the table, spreading out folders filled with documents. We've already collected proof of fraud and money laundering. Vanessa helped him hide assets in offshore accounts. Once this goes public, he'll not only lose his business, he'll face prison time. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Good, let him rot. But Robert's tone was measured. We can't celebrate yet. People like Edward always fight back when cornered. And he was right. Across the city, in a penthouse that was once a symbol of success, Edward Kane stood before the large window overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The television behind him played Isabella's interview on repeat. Vanessa paced the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her face was pale, her nerves frayed. She's winning, she said sharply. You need to do something. Edward turned from the window, his voice low but seething. You think I don't know that? Every contract is frozen, every investor is gone. They're turning me into a monster. Vanessa scoffed. You made yourself a monster the moment you hit her. Edward's eyes flashed with rage. "Don't you dare judge me. You started this. You're the one who told me she cheated. You're the one who made me believe her child wasn't mine." Vanessa's voice rose, trembling with fury. "Because you were easy to control. You wanted to believe it. No." Their shouting echoed through the penthouse until Edward slammed his glass against the wall, shards scattering across the floor. "Enough," he said, his voice shaking. "If the public wants a villain, I'll give them one. We'll hit back harder than ever." Vanessa hesitated. "How?" "Rumors," he said darkly. "We spread lies about her. Make her look unstable. Make her look like a manipulator who faked everything for sympathy." Vanessa's eyes gleamed, realizing the cruelty of the idea. "I know people who can make that happen. Fake messages, fake receipts. We can make her look like the liar." Edward nodded slowly, a twisted calm returning to his face. "Do it. If they want war, they'll have it." 2 days later, the smear campaign began. Anonymous accounts on social media started spreading fabricated screenshots and doctored photos. One headline read, "Was Isabella Carter having an affair?" Another claimed she exaggerated her injuries to frame her husband. At first, people dismissed the lies, but within hours, the rumors multiplied. Gossip sites picked them up, spinning wild theories. At the hospital, Isabella scrolled through her phone, disbelief clouding her face. "They're saying I made everything up," she whispered, "that I lied about the abuse." Daniel grabbed the phone from her, fury burning in his eyes. "I'll find whoever's posting this trash." David looked up from his laptop, his tone cold. "It's them, Edward and Vanessa. They're behind this." Robert's jaw tightened. "Of course they are. They can't fight the truth, so they're trying to drown it in lies." Isabella buried her face in her hands. "What if people believe them? What if everything we did just falls apart?" Robert moved closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then we fight harder. We don't back down." That night, the Carter brothers gathered in the hospital's family lounge. The room was dim, the hum of fluorescent lights blending with the steady sound of rain outside. David sat at the table, his laptop glowing. "We'll trace every source of those rumors. Whoever created them left a trail. Everyone leaves a trail." Daniel paced near the window, fists clenched. "And when we find them?" Robert's voice was calm but dangerous. "We expose them. We do exactly what they're doing, but with truth." David's eyes narrowed as lines of code filled the screen. "Got it," he said after a long silence. "There's a connection to a PR firm in Beverly Hills. Guess who their client is?" Robert leaned forward. "Edward Kane." "Bingo." The brothers exchanged looks. It wasn't just anger that bound them now. It was precision, focus, a quiet rage sharpened into purpose. The next day, they met with Sarah Chen, the family lawyer, in her downtown office. Sarah reviewed the evidence, her expression grim. "This isn't just defamation. This is criminal. They forged documents and paid third parties to spread false information. We can take this to court, but if you want real impact, we go public." Robert didn't hesitate. "We go public." That afternoon, David released a digital statement backed by verifiable evidence. Screenshots of bank transfers from Edward's company to the PR firm were shared online. Alongside them were timestamps, witness testimonies, and a video of Vanessa's assistant admitting she had been paid to post the lies. The internet exploded again, but this time in their favor. Hashtags turned from doubt to outrage. Justice for Isabella surged even higher. Thousands of supporters rallied online, demanding that Edward Kane and Vanessa Moore face consequences. At the hospital, Isabella watched it unfold in stunned silence. "They're finished," Daniel said, his grin fierce. Robert nodded, his voice quiet but firm. "Almost, but not yet. They still think they can control the narrative. We're going to end that illusion once and for all." David closed his laptop. "How?" Robert looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "The Beverly Hills Gala, it's next week. All the major investors, journalists, and public figures will be there. That's where we expose them completely. No lies, no lawyers, no hiding." Isabella hesitated. "You want me to go there?" "Yes," Robert said simply. "You deserve to face him on your own terms. You started this fight with courage. You'll end it with truth." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Isabella nodded slowly, her voice steady. "Then I'll be ready." Outside, thunder rolled again across the sky. as if the city itself knew that the storm was far from over. But this time, Isabella wasn't the one trapped in it. This time, she was walking straight into it, ready to end everything that Edward Kane and Vanessa Moore had started. The night of the Beverly Hills Gala arrived with dazzling lights and cameras flashing across the marble steps of the Grand Orion Hotel. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers shouted names, guests smiled for the press, and the soft murmur of music drifted from the ballroom. To the world outside, it looked like an evening of elegance and celebration. But for the Carter family, it was a battlefield. Inside a sleek black car parked by the curb, Isabella Carter took a deep breath. She wore a long navy dress that shimmered softly under the streetlights. Her bruises had faded to faint marks, but she didn't hide them. They were proof of survival. Her hair was pinned in a loose wave, and her hand rested protectively on her small baby bump. Robert sat beside her in a dark suit, adjusting his tie with quiet precision. David was in the front seat, scrolling through messages on his phone, confirming the press coverage and timing. Daniel leaned forward from the back, his eyes fixed on the glowing entrance ahead. Robert looked at his sister. "You're sure about this?" Isabella nodded. "Yes, I want them to see me. I want them to see the truth." David turned back from the front seat. "Once we walk in, everything will move quickly. The press is already inside. They think you're attending as a guest, not as the story." Daniel smirked. "They won't be thinking that for long." The car door opened. Flashbulbs erupted instantly. Reporters gasped as Isabella stepped out. For weeks, her face had filled headlines, but no one expected to see her standing there, graceful and composed, walking into the same world that had once worshipped Edward Kane. The whispers spread through the crowd like fire. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered like stars above polished floors. Music played softly, but tension thickened the air as people began to notice the Carters' arrival. Edward was already there, dressed in an immaculate black tuxedo. Vanessa stood beside him, radiant in a gold gown, smiling for cameras. But when Edward turned and saw Isabella across the room, the smile froze on his face. He whispered sharply to Vanessa, "What is she doing here?" Vanessa's smirk faltered. "I don't know. Maybe she's here to beg for sympathy again." Edward forced a thin smile and took her arm. "Then let's make sure she regrets showing up." Ugh. At the other end of the ballroom, Robert guided Isabella through the crowd, with David and Daniel close behind. They looked like a wall of calm power. A few journalists approached hesitantly, their microphones trembling slightly. "Mrs. Carter, what brings you here tonight?" one asked. Isabella paused, her gaze steady. "Truth," she said simply. "I'm here for the truth." That single sentence sent murmurs rippling through the audience. As dinner ended, the host took the stage, inviting sponsors to make announcements. Edward's name was called next. He stepped up confidently, taking the microphone with practiced charm. "Good evening," he began smoothly. "I'd like to thank everyone for your continued support during these difficult times. There have been misunderstandings, but tonight I want to remind you all that reputation and truth are not always the same thing." He smiled faintly, glancing in Isabella's direction. "Sometimes people say things to destroy what they can't have." Vanessa clapped politely from her seat. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some believed him. Others looked toward Isabella, who sat silently at her table, her expression calm. Then Robert rose. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cutting through the air. "Before you continue your speech, I think the room deserves to hear from the woman you're talking about." The ballroom fell silent. Edward froze mid-sentence. Cameras turned. Reporters raised their phones. Isabella stood. Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "Thank you, Robert." She walked slowly toward the stage, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Every step seemed to echo louder than the last. Edward forced a laugh. "This isn't the time or place, Isabella. It's the perfect time," she said calmly, "because this is where you built your lies, right here, among these people." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Edward tried to keep his composure. "You've embarrassed yourself enough. Please leave before." "Before what?" she interrupted. "Before you hit me again?" The words struck like lightning. The ballroom erupted into whispers. Edward's face turned pale. Isabella stepped up onto the stage beside him. "You told the world I lied. You said I hurt myself for attention. You paid people to spread false stories about me. But tonight, I brought proof." She turned to the back of the room, where David signaled the technician. Within seconds, the giant screen behind them lit up. A series of documents appeared. Bank transfers, emails, and recordings of Vanessa's assistant confessing to fabricating evidence. Gasps filled the air. Vanessa's eyes widened. "Turn that off!" she shouted, rushing toward the stage. But Robert and Daniel intercepted her. Daniel's voice was low and fierce. "Touch her, and you'll regret it." "No." On the stage, Isabella continued, her voice rising above the chaos. "I believed in love. I believed in forgiveness. But what Edward and Vanessa did wasn't love. It was control, cruelty, and lies. They wanted to silence me. But not tonight." The crowd began to murmur again, anger replacing confusion. Reporters lifted cameras, flashes exploding across the ballroom. Vanessa tried to shout over the noise. "She's lying! She's manipulating you all!" Then a new voice echoed through the microphone. It was a woman from the back of the room, stepping forward under the spotlight. "No, she's not." The crowd turned. It was Marisol Vega, Vanessa's former assistant. She walked confidently toward the stage, holding a folder of her own. "I worked for Vanessa. I helped forge those documents. I watched her laugh while destroying an innocent woman's life." Vanessa froze. "Marisol, don't you dare." Marisol ignored her. "I stayed quiet because I was scared. But not anymore." She handed the folder to Robert, who lifted it for the cameras to see. "Here's the original evidence, unaltered. It proves every lie they told." The ballroom exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Guests turned on Edward and Vanessa with disgust. Security began moving forward. Edward tried to defend himself, but his voice cracked. "You don't understand. This is a setup." Robert's voice thundered from the side. "The only setup is the one you built, and tonight it collapses." Police officers entered moments later, guided by David's prior call. The crowd watched as Edward and Vanessa were approached by two officers. Vanessa screamed, trying to pull away, but the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Edward stood frozen, his face drained of color. Isabella stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "You once told me I was nothing without you, but look at you now." Edward's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." "Oh." She shook her head. "No, I already did." As they were led out through the crowd, cameras followed every step. Applause began softly at first, then grew louder, echoing through the ballroom like thunder. Isabella stood beneath the bright lights, tears in her eyes but a smile on her lips. Robert approached and placed a protective arm around her shoulders. David and Daniel joined them, their faces calm but proud. "It's over," Robert said quietly. Isabella nodded. "No, it's just justice." Emser, outside, the night sky shimmered with city lights, but the brightest light was inside, the truth that had finally been set free. The dawn after the gala was quiet. The storm of flashing cameras and shouting reporters had faded into a calm that felt unreal. The headlines, however, had not. Every newspaper, every network, every trending post carried the same story. Millionaire Edward Kane and his mistress, Vanessa Moore, arrested after public exposure at Beverly Hills Gala. The world that had once adored them now turned away in disgust. Inside Los Angeles Memorial Hospital, sunlight streamed through the windows of a private maternity suite. The room was calm and white, filled with the faint scent of flowers and antiseptic. Isabella Carter lay in bed, her newborn daughter sleeping soundly in her arms. The baby's skin was soft and pink, her tiny fingers curling around her mother's thumb. Isabella smiled weakly, tears welling in her eyes. "Welcome to the world, Hope," she whispered. "You are everything they tried to destroy, and everything they couldn't." Robert entered first, followed by David and Daniel. They stopped at the doorway for a moment, silent, watching her. The exhaustion on their faces was softened by pride and relief. Robert spoke first. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. Isabella looked up, smiling. "She looks like Mom." David stepped closer, gazing at the baby. "She's already stronger than any of us were," he said softly. "Born into chaos, but perfectly calm." Daniel laughed under his breath. "She's a Carter. She doesn't know how to quit." The family stood together around the hospital bed. For the first time in months, there was no fear, no shouting, no threats, only peace. Isabella gently rocked the baby in her arms. "I can't believe it's finally over," she said. Robert's voice was calm but firm. "It's over for him, but for you, it's just beginning." She met his eyes. "Do you think he'll ever understand what he's done?" Robert shook his head slowly. "Men like Edward don't understand. They just lose. And he's lost everything." David placed a hand on her shoulder. "He's already been charged with multiple counts of domestic abuse, fraud, and coercion. His bail was denied. Vanessa made a deal to testify in exchange for a lighter sentence, but it won't save her reputation. The entire city knows the truth now." Isabella nodded, her gaze drifting to the window. "I thought I wanted revenge, but standing there last night, watching him being taken away, I just felt sad. Sad that love could become something so cruel." Robert sat at the edge of her bed. "It's not your fault. You gave him every chance to be better. He chose destruction." Daniel leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "He chose to hit a pregnant woman. He gets no sympathy from me." David smiled faintly. "You always were the hothead," Daniel shrugged. "Maybe. But if I had been there that night, he never would have lifted that stick." Isabella looked at her brothers, her eyes glistening. "You all came when I needed you most. I'll never forget that. Hope will grow up, knowing what real men are." Robert reached for the baby, holding her gently. "She'll grow up in a world where her mother fought back and won. That's what she'll know." For a while, they simply stood in silence, watching the infant sleep. Outside, the morning city moved as usual. But inside that small room, time seemed to pause. Later that afternoon, a soft knock came at the door. A familiar face appeared, Dr. Ethan Brooks. He smiled warmly as he entered. "You two are quite the miracle," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Isabella admitted. "But happy." He nodded. "Your vitals look good, and Hope is perfectly healthy. You both made it through the worst." He glanced toward Robert and her brothers. "I've seen many families fall apart after something like this. But you all stood together. That's rare." Robert nodded. "Family doesn't break." Ethan turned back to Isabella. "There's something else. The hospital administration is planning to host a charity event next month focused on supporting victims of domestic violence. They want you to speak if you're ready." Isabella's eyes widened slightly. "Me? You've already inspired millions," Ethan said. "Your story changed laws. The governor is proposing stricter penalties for domestic abusers after seeing what you endured. You've given people hope." Isabella looked down at her daughter. "That's her name," she said softly. "Hope." Ethan smiled. "Then it's perfect." After he left, David leaned against the wall, smiling. "You realize you're about to become a national figure, right? People are calling you the woman who fought back." Isabella laughed softly. "I don't want fame. I just want peace." "Lee." Robert looked at her. "Then peace is what you'll have. But don't forget, you've already given a voice to thousands who never had one. That's bigger than any of us." As the day faded into evening, Isabella asked the nurse to lower the lights. The room dimmed, leaving only the soft glow of the city outside. She hummed quietly to the baby, the melody gentle and familiar. Robert, David, and Daniel lingered by the window, talking in low voices about the future. Daniel finally broke the silence. "You think she'll ever trust someone again?" Robert looked at his sister. "In time, but she doesn't need to rush. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering who you are after the pain." David nodded. "And she's stronger now than she's ever been." As they prepared to leave for the night, Isabella whispered, "Stay for a while longer." So they did. The four of them sat together in the quiet, watching Hope sleep. The rhythmic sound of her breathing filled the room like a promise. Outside, in a jail cell across town, Edward Kane sat alone. The suit that once made him look powerful now hung loosely around his shoulders. Reporters' voices echoed faintly from a nearby television. Every mention of Isabella's name was a reminder of everything he had destroyed. He covered his face with his hands, but the darkness inside him offered no comfort. Back in the hospital, Isabella pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "You'll grow up in light," she whispered, "not in fear." "One." Robert stood and kissed his sister's forehead. "Rest. You've done enough fighting." As he turned to leave, Isabella's voice stopped him. "Robert." He turned. "Thank you for not giving up on me." He smiled. "You never gave up on yourself. We just helped you remember who you were." Hours later, the hospital fell into deep silence. The city lights shimmered through the blinds, painting soft patterns across the floor. Isabella slept with hope resting on her chest. Somewhere beyond the walls, a new day was already beginning. But inside that room, the story had already ended. Not with pain, not with revenge, but with redemption. For Isabella Carter, the nightmare was over. The man who tried to break her was gone. The brothers who saved her stood strong beside her. And in her arms, the tiny heartbeat of her daughter whispered the one truth that outlasts every wound. Love survives.